What if a single bark could change the course of justice? A dog's loyalty, unspoken but powerful, can uncover truths that words often fail to express. In the silence of a wounded soldier, his dog, Rex, stood as the only voice for justice. This is a story where love, loyalty, and a quiet bond speak louder than anything else. The courtroom was dead silent. The only sounds were the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall and the quiet scratch of pens on legal pads. The air was thick with anticipation as all eyes focused on the man in the wheelchair. Liam Carter, a 35-year-old former Marine, sitting with a stoic expression that concealed the turmoil beneath. Beside him, standing like an unshakable guardian, was Rex, his loyal German shepherd. Rex was tall, alert, with dark, piercing eyes that seemed to absorb every movement in the room. His fur was thick and well-groomed, yet there was something about the way he carried himself that spoke of the battles he had endured, silent yet unwavering. Liam's trial was about trespassing and using a dangerous animal to harm someone, charges that stemmed from an event that had turned his life upside down. He had been accused of breaking into a home and sending his dog to attack an innocent father, a claim that couldn't have been further from the truth. The prosecutor, a sharp and meticulous woman, paced back and forth in front of the jury. Her heels clicked on the polished floor with each step, punctuating her words as she made her case. "This isn't about his military service," she said, her voice rising in certainty. "This is about a man who broke into a home and set his attacked dog on an innocent father. This is about a dangerous individual, one who is clearly out of control." The words stung, but Liam did not respond. His hands were folded in his lap, his gaze fixed straight ahead. The explosion that had nearly taken his life in a faraway desert had left him physically broken. His spine had been shattered, and the aftermath had stolen not just his ability to walk, but also his voice. He had learned to communicate in silence, allowing the unspoken to do the talking. A man of few words, Liam let the room draw its conclusions. He had nothing to say, but his eyes, still sharp despite the toll the war had taken on him, told their own story. The first witness, Daniel Hart, stood up and took the stand, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "This man attacked me," Hart claimed, his voice shaking. His dog charged at me for no reason. It was terrifying." He pointed a trembling finger at Liam, his words growing more frantic. "I didn't provoke him. I didn't do anything." Liam's eyes flicked to Rex. The dog, as still as a statue, locked eyes with the witness. He hadn't moved until now. Rex's ears twitched. A low growl rumbled from his throat, barely audible, but enough to make the room shift uneasily. The tension in the air thickened. Liam's hand, almost imperceptible to those around him, shifted, his thumb tucked in, and two fingers pointed downward, a small but deliberate gesture. Immediately, Rex stood up. His movements were calm but deliberate, his body taut with readiness. The courtroom gasped collectively, unsure of what was happening. The judge, a stern, seasoned man, narrowed his eyes. "Control your dog, Mr. Carter," he snapped, his tone sharp and commanding. But Rex did not lunge. He didn't show aggression. Instead, he walked toward Hart, his movements slow and measured. As the dog approached, the witness recoiled, his body stiff with fear. Rex sniffed Hart's coat once, twice, before pulling out a small object from the pocket of Hart's jacket. It was a child's toy, a dinosaur keychain, its colorful surface marred by something dark and sticky. The entire courtroom fell into stunned silence. The keychain clinked softly as it dropped to the floor, its dark stain now unmistakable. The judge stood, his voice booming in the otherwise silent room. "What is that?" Hart's face paled as he stammered, his words barely a whisper. I don't know what that is," he sputtered, eyes wide with panic. Rex stood motionless, his head held high, watching the unfolding drama with the quiet dignity only a loyal dog could possess. He did not bark or growl, but the look in his eyes spoke volumes. The judge's eyes flickered to the toy. This changes everything," he muttered under his breath before addressing the court with authority. "Court is recessed. We will reconvene after further investigation." As the room emptied, the whispers of doubt began to grow louder. Rex had just uncovered the truth in a way no one could have expected. The keychain, now stained in blood, was the key to the entire mystery. It wasn't just a toy, it was evidence of something far darker. Liam Carter's life had never been easy, but it had always been predictable. As a soldier in the military, he had been trained to withstand everything life could throw at him. The battles, the long nights spent in the desert, the constant fear of death, it was all part of the job. But nothing could have prepared him for the moment when an IED exploded beneath him, tearing apart his body and leaving him broken in ways he never thought possible. The explosion had shattered his spine, leaving him unable to walk. His once strong limbs were now useless, and the pain he experienced daily was a reminder of the high price he had paid for his service. His voice, once loud and commanding, had been taken from him as well. The injuries to his throat made speaking nearly impossible, and he found it difficult to communicate with the people around him. But that wasn't the worst part of it. The worst part was seeing his dog, Rex, lying beside him in the sand, bloodied and weak. Rex had been his partner through everything, the one who had never failed to have his back. The dog's massive frame had been torn by the explosion, his eyesight permanently damaged by the blast. But even then, Rex had fought to stay by Liam's side. It wasn't just a bond formed through duty, it was a bond forged in the fires of war, one that transcended the battlefield. Liam had fought tooth and nail to keep Rex by his side after his discharge. The military had retired the dog, deeming him unfit for service due to his injuries. But Liam knew there was no way he was leaving Rex behind. He couldn't. He owed Rex his life, and he would never abandon him. It was a battle that took months, but Liam eventually won, adopting Rex and bringing him home. They were both broken in body, but together they found a sense of peace, one that was slowly healing the wounds they had both sustained. Liam's days were filled with pain, but they also had moments of quiet comfort. The two of them would sit together in the living room, surrounded by the comforting hum of everyday life, a life that was slowly becoming more normal. Liam would read books or watch television, and Rex would lay beside him, his head resting on Liam's lap. It was a silent companionship, but it was a companionship that meant everything to both of them. Despite the peace they had found, however, the world outside their home was not so peaceful. The neighborhood they lived in was far from ideal, and tensions simmered just beneath the surface. There was one neighbor in particular who had always rubbed Liam the wrong way. Daniel Hart, a man whose presence always seemed to cast a dark shadow. Daniel lived in the house next to Liam's, and though their interactions were few, Liam had never trusted him. There was something about the man that seemed off, his restless energy, his quick temper, and his strange behavior. One night as Liam sat in his living room with Rex, something caught his attention, a sound coming from next door. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it quickly grew louder. It was a child crying, the kind of desperate sobbing that immediately made Liam's instincts flare. The sound was raw, filled with pain, and it tore through the silence of the night like a knife. Liam's heart began to race. He turned toward the security monitor in the corner of the room, his eyes scanning the image of Daniel's house. He could see movement inside, the shadowy figures of Daniel and his son. Daniel's hand was raised, and the unmistakable slap of a blow echoed through the speaker. The boy's cries grew louder, and Liam's blood ran cold. Without hesitation, Liam grabbed his phone and dialed 911. His hands shook as he spoke to the dispatcher, his voice low and urgent, despite the difficulty in speaking. He explained what he had seen, but the dispatcher's response was as cold as the air outside. "We can't act without proof, sir. Please wait for the authorities to arrive." Liam clenched his fists in frustration, the helplessness of the situation gnawing at him. He couldn't just sit there while a child was in danger. But what could he do? He was confined to a wheelchair, his body incapable of doing what his heart so desperately wanted. It wasn't long before the crying stopped. The quiet that followed was unbearable. But just as Liam began to doubt his decision to call for help, a small, trembling figure appeared at his doorstep. The boy, no older than 8, stood there in the dim light of the porch. His clothes were dirty, his face bruised, and his eyes wide with fear. He didn't speak. He didn't make a sound. He just stood there, shaking. Liam's heart shattered at the sight of the boy, but he didn't hesitate. He opened the door and gently ushered the child inside. The boy didn't resist. He simply walked into the safety of Liam's home, where he was offered warmth, food, and a sense of security that he had never known. The boy was silent as he sat on the couch, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. His face was streaked with tears and his small body trembled with fear. Liam did his best to comfort him, but the boy wouldn't speak. Instead, he clung to Rex, who had been watching the whole scene with keen eyes. The dog, sensing the boy's pain, gently nuzzled him, offering the only comfort he knew how to give. Liam knew he couldn't keep the boy there forever. He called child services, explaining the situation and urging them to act quickly. But the hours passed and there was still no response. He called again, but still they couldn't send anyone without proper evidence. The bureaucracy of it all was maddening. It wasn't until the next morning that the real danger came crashing in. Liam was making breakfast when he heard a loud banging on his front door. He froze, his heart skipping a beat. It was Daniel Hart. The man's voice was loud, angry, and unmistakable. "You stole my kid," he yelled, his fist pounding on the door. "Give him back, Carter." Liam's eyes shot to Rex, who had immediately gone on alert. The dog growled low in his throat, sensing the danger that was approaching. Without thinking, Liam wheeled himself to the door, locking it just as Daniel tried to force his way inside. He was furious, his face twisted in rage as he tried to break the door down. But Rex was ready. With a single, swift motion, the German Shepherd launched himself at Daniel, his jaws clamping around the man's arm. It wasn't a vicious attack, it was a measured bite, enough to stop him, but not enough to cause serious harm. Rex had been trained to protect, and he did so without hesitation. Daniel staggered back, shocked by the force of the dog's bite. Liam, his heart racing, didn't know what to do next, but Rex's actions had bought him enough time. The boy was safe for now, but for how long? Daniel Hart wasn't done. The man was enraged, but as he backed away, Rex remained by Liam's side, watching him with a calm intensity. Daniel, defeated for the moment, stormed off. But Liam knew this wasn't over. He had just made an enemy of a man who would stop at nothing to regain control. As the hours stretched on, Liam's mind raced. He knew Daniel would come back. He would try to take the boy, or worse, he would try to hurt him. There was no telling what lengths the man would go to, but Liam was determined to protect the child who had trusted him. And he knew that Rex, his loyal companion, would be right there with him, as always. But the real test came in the courtroom. Liam's decision to protect the boy and intervene in the first place had set off a chain of events that no one could have predicted. The charges against him were clear. He had been accused of trespassing, of using his dog as a weapon. But there was something that no one had counted on: Rex. The keychain that Rex had pulled from Daniel's coat pocket would become the turning point in the trial. It wasn't just a child's toy. It was the evidence that would unravel Daniel's twisted story and expose the truth about what had been happening behind closed doors. And so, as the trial continued, Liam and Rex knew that their journey was far from over. But no matter what happened, they would face it together, silent, steadfast, and ready to protect those who needed them the most. The world outside Liam's home was buzzing with the aftermath of the trial. The courtroom drama was over and Daniel Hart was in custody. The boy, now safe, had been placed into foster care, and his injuries were slowly healing. The community, once divided by whispers and doubts, now rallied behind Liam and Rex, their silent heroes. Yet despite all the attention and the relief that came with the truth being exposed, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. He had spent years fighting for his country, for his survival, and for Rex. And now, after everything that had happened, he found himself at a crossroads, uncertain of what came next. The past was a heavy weight on his shoulders, and though he had gained a sense of peace with Rex, there was still something inside him that yearned for more, a new purpose, something greater than the quiet life they were living now. It wasn't that he wanted to forget the past or pretend it didn't matter, but the events of the last few months had shown him that there was still more he could do, more he could give. He wasn't just a broken soldier or a man in a wheelchair. He was a veteran, and he had something to offer, something beyond just surviving. He had a voice, even if it was silent. He had a purpose, even if he hadn't yet figured out what it was. Rex, ever loyal and by his side, seemed to understand this unspoken need. The dog had been his companion through thick and thin, from the battlefields of war to the quiet moments at home. But even Rex, with his gentle eyes and unwavering loyalty, seemed to be waiting for something more. It was one evening, as Liam sat in the living room, staring out the window at the darkening sky, that the idea came to him. It was simple, yet profound. Pause for courage. The thought hit him like a wave, a sudden and undeniable urge. It was the one thing he had never done before. Reach out beyond his own pain and help others like him. Help veterans who had come home from the war, only to be left behind by a system that didn't know how to help them heal. Help soldiers who had lost more than just their legs or their vision. Help them find the same bond he had with Rex, something that could help them heal, something that could give them purpose again. Pause for Courage would be a program designed to help veterans who were suffering from PTSD, disabilities, and the weight of their experiences. It would train German shepherds, just like Rex, to be service dogs, to be companions, to help these men and women find the strength to keep going. It was the one thing that made sense to Liam, the one thing that felt right, and with Rex by his side, he knew they could make it happen. The next day, Liam began researching. He spent hours on the computer, learning about service dog training programs and the resources available for veterans. He spoke with other veterans, hearing their stories and their struggles. Many of them were in the same position he had once been. Lost, struggling with the trauma of war, and searching for something that could give their lives meaning again. It didn't take long before Liam had a plan. He reached out to local organizations, sharing his idea and asking for help. He started to build a network of volunteers, trainers, other veterans, even people who just wanted to help. He worked tirelessly, setting up meetings and connecting with the right people. Slowly but surely, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Pause for Courage was born. It didn't take long before the program began to grow. Liam's reputation, built on his bravery in the trial and his quiet strength, spread through the community. People began to see him not as the broken man in the wheelchair, but as someone who was doing something meaningful, something that mattered. Rex became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the broken could heal, and that even the quietest among us could find a voice. The first few months were difficult. Liam worked tirelessly, spending long hours training dogs and meeting with veterans. The physical labor was exhausting, but the emotional toll was even harder to bear. The stories the veterans shared were heart-wrenching. They spoke of the horrors they had witnessed, the lives they had lost, and the scars that no one could see. It was painful for Liam to hear, but he knew it was necessary. He couldn't turn away from the pain if he wanted to help them heal. Rex, ever the steady presence by his side, proved to be an invaluable part of the program. The dog's calm demeanor, his intuitive understanding of the veterans' needs, made him the perfect role model for the other dogs in the program. Rex was the one who taught them how to be gentle, how to be alert, how to protect when needed, and how to simply be there when their human needed them most. Rex's bond with Liam was a testament to what could be achieved when two broken souls found each other in the darkest of places. The success of the program was undeniable. People began to take notice. News outlets came to interview Liam and the veterans, eager to share the story of Pause for Courage. The media coverage brought in donations, allowing the program to expand. Liam was able to hire more staff, train more dogs, and reach even more veterans. What started as a small idea in the quiet of his living room was quickly becoming a movement. Despite the growing success of the program, Liam remained humble. He didn't do it for the recognition or the praise. He did it for the veterans, for the dogs, and for himself. There were days when the weight of it all felt overwhelming, but he had Rex by his side, and that was enough. Rex had always been his anchor, his constant companion, and now the dog was a beacon of hope for others. Together, they were healing broken souls, one dog at a time. One afternoon, after a particularly successful training session, with a new group of veterans, a child approached Liam. It was a school visit, and Liam had agreed to share his story with the children. The young boy, no older than 7, raised his hand and asked, "Does Rex know what justice means?" Liam smiled, the question catching him off guard. He looked down at Rex, who was sitting quietly beside him, his eyes full of understanding. "No," Liam replied softly, "but he knows love, and that's enough." It was a simple answer, but it resonated deeply with everyone who heard it. Justice wasn't about revenge or punishment. It wasn't about proving someone right or wrong. It was about love, about the bond between a soldier and his dog, between a man and the people he helped, and between the broken souls who found healing in each other. As the years went by, Pause for Courage continued to grow, touching the lives of veterans and dogs alike. Liam had found his new mission, his new purpose. It wasn't about recognition or fame. It was about making a difference. He had found peace not in the silence of his own home, but in the lives of others. And with Rex by his side, he knew they would continue to change the world one step at a time. Some heroes don't need words. Some heroes are silent, but that doesn't make them any less powerful.